There's a location, a mountain, of historical significance and issues that deal with different sides of things that come from space. As we remote viewed some events that occurred on the mountain, we also let the remote viewing lead us to capture our own evidence. Palomar Mountain California. It rises about 6,000 feet above sea level and is home to a very famous observatory. It's got a 200-inch Hale telescope there. It was built in the 1930s, and they've been watching for near-Earth objects as well as other things in the nighttime sky. But on the other side of this, George Adamski took his really famous and iconic UFO photographs in the shadow of the mountain. George also claimed that he had contact with the occupants of these craft. He called them the Space Brothers because, well, they were friendly. They came, they gave him rides on a flying saucer. Later years, other contactees also called them the Space Brothers. And there's a similarity between the stories and the way they looked. Now, I'm not really interested in the historical perspective of these UFO contacts that happened around the mountain. What I'm interested in is what's happening currently. What can we look at right now that's going on? Because I know in the 70 years since George took those photographs, there have been a lot of things that are going on around the mountain. People have seen cigar-shaped UFOs with orbs coming out of them. People have been driving down the road and headlights appear behind them and then mysteriously disappear. There have been sightings of a lot of different disc-type craft around the mountain. So from my perspective, I want to look at some sightings that happened more recently and then see if I can head out to a location and capture anything anomalous on film. So what we're going to do here is we're going to remote view two different cases. They're not so much cases as they're photographs, and they're not that exciting as far as ufology is concerned, but they're interesting because what we found was that they were related to each other. Now, keep in mind that remote viewing is done totally blind. The remote viewers don't know what they're going to remote view beforehand. That way the data stays absolutely clean. Now, this first photograph was taken in May of 2017 by a camper up on the mountain and submitted to MUFON. So with remote viewing, we wanted to identify what this object is and why it's there. The remote viewers immediately describe what's in the sky in the photograph. A oblong object or craft. One viewer just calls it a UFO. They say it's moving very fast in and out of the area, and interestingly, they describe a being associated with it, a humanoid type being that is operating it. This being is tall and lanky. The eyes are large, have somewhat of a cat-like pupil, and they state that the being is somewhat green in color. Now, as far as why the being is there and what it's doing, well, it's connected with other beings that are on the ground. They are going through the meadows higher up on the mountain, collecting plant life. They're also collecting rocks and minerals, stuff that they can use. So pretty much right away, the data just jumps into high strangeness. When we jump to this other photograph that was taken in 2015, interestingly enough, the data is somewhat similar. Again, we have the same being that is cat-eyed, flying around in this craft, associated with other beings on the ground that are collecting plants and minerals. So it looks like this activity has been occurring at least for the last 2 years. So between these two sightings, we may just have continual activity occurring on the mountain. And that takes us to the next thing we want to do. What we want to look at now is the location in which to set up our cameras, in which we can maybe capture something on film, or we can capture some type of evidence of. It's pretty clear that we've got to get up high, either on the mountain or looking at the mountain, getting a good vantage point. But we also have a bit of data that's referring to a body of water, and I think I know where that is. Now, as far as setting up in one of those locations, we'll see what happens. I don't know if we'll be able to do it. We may have to opt for our second choice and that is moving off the mountain and looking at it and setting our cameras up there, because we have a location that we can basically hang out at for a couple weeks. All right, we're going to head up to the mountain. We've got a couple locations to go. First priority is we want to go see if we can find an area where we can set up on the mountain. If that doesn't work out, then we'll go hit our secondary location that looks at the mountain. When we're up there, we also want to go to the place where 3 UFO conferences were held in the 1950s. Check that out. Then we also want to go see the observatory. So let's do it. The south side, going up the east side. This is going the east side of Palomar. This is Lake Henshaw. And the lake is where there's a lot of UFO activity. Some of our data indicates that this is an interesting area to capture some type of phenomena on camera. But I don't know, there's really no place to hang out here except on the side of the road unless we go down to the lake. Let's head up to the old Skyline Lodge and check out where they did the UFO conferences. This is where George Adamski had 3 UFO conferences in the 1950s, and this is where supposed Venusians had shown up. Some of the Space Brothers and sisters. Whatever happened to them anyway? You know the ones I'm talking about. I mean, tight-fitting spacesuits, super hot. They were like Nordic, blonde hair. They'd come down in their flying saucer, walk off the ramp like space models, wave at a human like Adamski, ask if they want to ride on the flying saucer. They'd get a ride, they'd come back, they'd write like 5 books about it. When did it turn from that into like the big-headed, bug-eyed guys coming to take you away at night? But anyway, this is the location where 3 UFO conferences were held in the 1950s. This is pretty cool, but I'm easily impressed. Most people who visit the mountain don't come to see where some of the first UFO conferences were held. They come to see the massive dome holding the 200-inch Hale telescope at Palomar Observatory. Established in 1936, the observatory is actually a large complex of instruments spanning many acres, and it's responsible for some of the clearest images ever taken of space, clearer even than the Hubble Space Telescope. With all the supposed activity that takes place around here, you've got to wonder if these guys see anything strange in the sky.
It says searching the sky for dangerous neighbors. That's probably why there are no more Space Brothers. They're keeping them away.
Massive view behind us. Thunderheads forming. Definitely can't hang out here for very long, but this is a perfect location. I think what we're going to do though is we're going to go back down the mountain to the location that we know where, we can basically camp out there for 2 weeks and we have a fantastic view of Palomar Mountain. We're not on it, but we'll have cameras pointed at it. Because I don't think we can exist up here with thunderheads. All right, we are all set up on our viewing platform. We were able to get this location for about 2 weeks. We are literally about 25 to 35 miles from Palomar Mountain with an outstanding view of it. We have a 8-inch telescope. We've got a telescopic lens on a digital camera, really nice lens, Sigma. We have an infrared camera. It's a video camera, so we're going to roll that off and on. We've got a thermal camera. I don't know how well it's going to work though because of the distance involved. It doesn't do well on distance. Then we've got a webcam connected to a computer running an algorithm that will only turn on if there's movement in the sky. So we're going to run that pretty much 24/7. And I think we're good to go. All right, so now we're in for the long haul. Ultimately, it just takes a lot of patience. That's good. Yeah, it was nothing. Like 30 photos later. It looks like we caught something interesting. It's like 4:30 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I got up and I'm running through the footage on the webcam. Something set it off and it wasn't an airplane. The first one is really interesting. It's this sort of spinning orb that shows up in the middle of the screen, which is different than the way the airplanes come across. It just appears in the middle of the screen. It has a sensation of spinning to it, and then it fades out rather quickly. But this second one here I find incredibly fascinating. It starts out as a dot. Again, it's showing up mid-screen, which is interesting. It doesn't come in from the side, just appears and triggers the camera. Moves across the screen, and then right there, look at this, it is flaring. It almost looks like plasma. Some type of energy is flaring out from this craft, and then it goes back into just a ball of light. So keep in mind that when we compress the video as well as zoom in, some quality is lost. But you can see this starts off somewhat like a UFO, a disc-like shape, and then it lets off these plasma-like flares, and you can clearly see these locations where these almost jets are coming out of. Now the context here is that this is moving horizontally over the landscape, perfect sky view in the vicinity of the mountain. So I would say it's about 20-ish miles away from me, which would place it between me and the mountain just a slight bit. And it seems to be, well, it could have come up off of the mountain because of the way that it just appears more or less in the middle of the screen. Now it's remote viewing that took us to this location in order to capture something on film. And our next step is to remote view what this is. I can tell you that preliminary remote viewing data shows that this is definitely otherworldly.